All right. So, Salman and I just kind of talked about, we both use Procreate, and I think it's such a wonderful tool to do some simple things with it. My style in general is very simplistic. I use just a couple of tools, and I tend to just use a few colors, and I set some constraints around each illustration that I do, just to not really like overwhelm myself. And um, so maybe we can talk a little bit about our process first. And we were kind of thinking we'll just break this up. We'll talk a little bit about how we organize a new document, and then I'll do a demo. Salman will do a demo, and then we'll just do like a live Q&A afterwards. So it's kind of how we're thinking we'll roll with this, but who knows what'll happen. Um, so yeah, I'll let me switch my camera here, and so I think what interests me about Procreate is what I like to do is add images to like my articles and my blog posts, and so they're pretty simple. Um, and what I typically do is I think Salman is a little bit different of an illustrator than I am. I tend to reference things a lot because I like to just do them quickly, and so I try to keep things really simple for my process. So for instance, I'll show a couple of my illustrations and I'll just maybe walk through them a little bit. But this is for a buckwheat article that I wrote. And, finding these, I'll basically go online and think about what are the types of photos and images that I can kind of pull from to add a layer of style over it. And this is kind of like when I'm thinking about a blog article, I'll think about like maybe there's 3 or 4 images that'll really enhance the piece of what I wrote and kind of allow people to be drawn in to not just the words, but also the imagery. And so for this particular article, I had 3 images here, and one was sort of like buckwheat hulls. And essentially what I did was I went on to Google image search and found close-ups of buckwheat hulls and just kind of added my own sort of like style behind it. And I'll show that in a little while. But and same for this. Like I found a pillow online that represented a buckwheat pillow that I wanted to kind of capture the overall shape of it and give it some depth here. But then these I just kind of added in as I studied what the hulls look like, in different positions. So really just small, quick illustrations I think can go a long way. So typically what I do is, I just have, this is like a note-taking tool for me. Like there's just kind of so many, I think Salman will show something similar, but it's like these are all notes that I'm thinking about just visually. And so what I tend to do is I have like a blog within Procreate. This is sort of like the beginning interface. And within this, I can basically, let's see here, where did it go? Oh, here, just had a blank sheet on top. So what I'll do is I'll just create like a folder called blog design. And the way you do that is like, you can just create a new canvas. And I typically just pick the default up here, the screen size. I don't think you need to concern yourself too much with the document size in general. Because when you export it, anything that goes on the web is going to be really small in size generally. It's nothing that you need for print. And so I'll have a canvas here, and then typically what I'll do is if I have a few of these, I'll just drag these into a folder here and kind of have everything sort of contained. But let's just jump in. I'll just start kind of like going through my process, but are there any questions about Procreate in general before I dive in? Okay, cool. Okay, so first things, you have your palette of brushes here, and when you jump in here, there's just a lot of tools. And I think what's really fun is to just play around. I was I was listening to the Kanye West podcast with Joe Rogan the other day, and he talks about creativity and how when he's designing a shoe, you just have to act like a 3-year-old. And I just think that that's kind of how you should approach this stuff, is just be really playful. It's like writing kind of like, you see a sentence that kind of captures your imagination. And it's the same with just finding something that resonates with you. I think we all have core values and things that we're drawn to. And so I've always been just a really just basic sketcher. And so I'm really drawn to pencils in general. And so what they have is these categories here. And so within sketching, I might, pick something from here. But what's really interesting about Procreate, if you click on any of these, you have this drawing pad, which is really fun. So you can kind of just test them out. You can play with some of the characteristics of each pencil and just find something that resonates with you. And so for me, I have this folder called blog here, and I just have 2 pencils, and that's all I use. And I've spoken with a few people about finding consistency in your illustrations, and part of it is setting up bumper lanes. So you just have a couple of lanes, like a couple of tools that you always rely on. And imagine like big brands like Target or IKEA, like they have just a couple of colors, a couple of typefaces, and you can do a lot with just a few things. So these are the things that I'm drawn to. Like these are the things that kind of give me joy when I'm drawing. And so I would just recommend kind of going through all of these and just kind of having some fun with it. And maybe just putting a couple in a folder. And the way that you would do that really simply is you'd find a brush that you like, and then this is where my basic knowledge comes in. I think you hit, no, that's not it. I think this is what you drag it off. Nope, that wasn't it either. Salman, do you know how to create a folder?
I think if you drag it into that brush list, you can either insert it into an existing one. See if it lets you put it in there. Yeah. Let me open it up here.
Oh, you know what? There's a plus sign at the top that once you scroll down. So, okay, so here we go. So you might just create a new folder set, and then we'll just call this deck. And then, yeah, you can just drag these into there. Perfect. Okay. So that's what I've done, is just to kind of, every time I come into a new file, I just want to be able to access the 2 brushes that I use most commonly. And so what those are for me is this 6B pencil, which is like a very dark, like very high contrast pencil. And I love this just because I can sketch really light and just kind of like create sort of an outline of what I'm thinking about or trace something. And then I can kind of go back over it and actually like do something interesting with it. And then my style is sort of like this harsh contrast illustration, line style that balances with some really soft colors. And so I'll use my other gloaming. I don't know. It's a cool name. I have no idea what actually it looks like in real life, but I use this for all my really light color work that goes on behind here. So yeah, I think what I'll do next, if there's no questions, I'm gonna kind of recreate one of the illustrations that I did recently. So I did this article called Call Marie Your Creative Life. And this is a more complex image, but I think what's interesting is how kind of simple it can be. And I knew that the header area of my article was about curating all of your digital like outputs or your digital inputs. And I knew I had this idea of like, how do I show hands? But I'm not a great illustrator. I'm not like going to just reference from an image in my mind and draw hands. So what I normally do in this case is I took a picture of my own hands. So I already did that. And I just have to figure out sort of a photo. Okay, so here. So I had my wife take a picture of my hands, really ugly hands. And what you can do with this is there's a couple of shortcuts, but if you just double tap or single tap with 2 fingers on an image, then you can kind of just draw back the opacity a little bit. And this is your layers palette here. And I'll just create a new layer on top. And this one, if you single tap, you can essentially lock it. Maybe you swipe and lock it. So I'm going to grab my 6B pencil, one of the 2 pencils, and I'm essentially just going to like use black. And, you know, I'm going to just start kind of like getting an idea. And what's great about a detailed picture is when you pull it back in opacity, it actually pulls away a lot of the detail that you have. And so you don't need to be precise about this stuff. And honestly, I'd go on like Pinterest and find and Google like illustrators and just find a style that resonates with you and kind of replicate it. And so for me, it's just this like, you know, single line. I'm gonna kind of do this quickly. I'm gonna ignore my gross feet down there. And then let's kind of just bring this in. There's some like wrinkles in the skin that I know are like really defining characteristics of your hand, but I kind of forget what they are. So I'm just going to do a couple of things like that. And so as you get this shape, you know, you can turn off the layer and just like, okay, this is pretty ugly right now, but it's going somewhere. And then what you do is, if you're familiar with Photoshop or any other editing tool, you can create another layer. And I'm going to just drop that below this. And I'm going to kind of start playing with some color a little bit. It's probably a little early, but I'll just do that now. And I have a couple of favorite colors that I typically use. This one's kind of a light skin tone of my hands. And I usually get really messy with this stuff. And so the style that I kind of go after is I don't want to spend too much time on this. So I want a loose style, and I'll honestly just kind of do this and just kind of go over it. And if you notice, it's got kind of an interesting look. It's a little bit like playful outside the lines. It's not completely accurate. But I'm going to go back to my photo because there's a light source. And I think one thing that you can do to add to your photos is sort of think about a light source that comes in, because you can take a simple illustration and add a ton of depth to it. And so when my wife took this photo, and I can kind of hide these other layers. So there's a light source coming from the top here, and it's kind of bouncing off the left side. So I'm just going to use that as a basic reference so that when I'm adding a little bit of like darker color here, let's see. And they have these different wheels here that you can use. I'm going to come in and just start adding some depth here. And you'll notice that the light source is coming into the top left here and a little bit around the right side. And so in here, it gets a little bit darker. And there's a couple of characteristics with certain brushes. So like this brush in particular, if I let up and then drop back down, it kind of creates like a darker shade and a darker shade on top of it. And so I try to stay away from that. I try to do sort of just a quick wash, just all over really quickly. And then I'll come back in. And as the light hits your hand, it gets a little bit darker in the creases. So I'm just going to keep going a little bit more. And let's just say like, okay, we're getting kind of close, but you know, there was a point where I wanted to add in all these little cool inputs. So like YouTube videos, tweets, quotes, book articles. And so I'm going to go back to my pencil and I'm going to just add a new layer. So I added a new layer right up here. And what's cool is you can kind of just get in and start designing. So what I was thinking, like the easiest way for someone to think about YouTube is just, maybe just the logo, the triangle. And then I'll add something over here. Maybe this was like a quote. Just kind of using some basic ideas. And then you'll notice that I'm just drawing over, because this is on a separate layer. I'm just kind of going over, and I'll come back and clean this up later. What's another thing? Just like maybe just like an image of someone. That's pretty messy. So maybe do another YouTube video over here. So you'll see like all these layers are separated out. Because I want to get through this really quickly, I'm actually just going to go and erase kind of back here. And I want these to pop out just from the hand. So I'm just erasing the color of the skin and allowing these inputs to pop out a little bit. There's some other details that might be kind of fun, like maybe there's some stars here. And I'm just using the one pencil that I chose before. And maybe I want some bright yellows in here, just to add some sparkles. And so we're kind of like moving down this path of it's kind of an interesting image. Nobody else has this image. It's something I can use for my articles. I can attach them to, a tweet if I wanted to send that out. I can attach it to a newsletter if I'm writing something about it there. So what's great about this is it's so useful across a lot of different mediums, and it's mine. And so as you start to create more illustrations like this using just a couple of tools, there's this, brand equity that you're building up based on your look and feel. And I think when you think about people like Ben Thompson, who does his own illustrations, and even Tim Urban of Wait But Why, like it's crazy how bad they are, but they're Tim Urbans. Like they're so simple and unique and funny, and you just kind of know it's his style when you see it. So yeah, I think, what else? Is there anything else you want to see here? I feel like that's it, but let me know. All right.
That was really cool to see. Thanks for actually going through the actual steps, and in a very short time, it actually, like, you can see the shadows actually give it depth. And like you said, it's really unique.
Yeah, it's not too far off from the final version. I just probably spent another 20 minutes going in and adding some more layers here, thinking of some new media types to add here. But the point is, at least my goal is to spend more time on writing and less time on drawing. But I know that the visual component adds so much to a piece of writing. And when you read Salman's newsletter, it's like, oh yeah, like I know this is his writing partly because of the visuals, and it just draws me in right away because it's so interesting.
Thank you so much, Nate. I absolutely love that. I just have one question actually about, I think it's kind of interesting to think about. So obviously you took a photo of your hands, but if I were to say, search the internet for a photo of someone, or I don't know, a company logo, and I would sketch over it, is there anything I need to be thinking about in terms of copyright stuff?
No, it's a great question. I think in general, I wouldn't really be too concerned. It depends on how you're using it though. Like if you're using it to promote yourself using someone else's company, that's maybe one thing. But in terms of like recreating, there's this idea that everything is a remix, and I truly believe that concept by Kirby Ferguson, who wrote, filmed a great documentary on this. But part of what writing is, part of what drawing is, part of what photography is, a lot of these creative mediums is looking at things through your own perspective and your own lens. And so depending, like I said, on the context, I wouldn't really be too worried about that. Do you have like a specific example?
No, I was actually just thinking, I really, so for example, I was thinking if I had the Google logo, but I wanted to kind of graffiti it in some way or something like that. And, is there anything I need to be considering before I do something like that?
Yeah, I can't think of anything for something like that, especially if you're using, especially, and Ben, like I love your writing, by the way, but something that you are trying to, like, let's say you're writing an article that's talking a little bit about the messiness of Google's algorithms or something like that, and you're kind of like wanting to complement that piece with a logo. I wouldn't even cross my mind, to be honest.
They would reserve the right to ask you to take it down, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you might. Highly unlikely.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you were to include their actual logo there, is that a concern? And it's probably not, right? Like they're not going to do anything, but there's always some risk if you're like attacking them and there's a Google logo there, then maybe they would execute and say, okay, take this down. But another way to think about it in terms of pictures, like if you see somebody else's art, like a photo that they took, and then you're trying to draw off that, and you're worried like maybe you're infringing on that artist's copyright. I guess another way to think about it is like some artists can draw without even having that reference. They could draw that without using the photo. So, you could always draw something and it's your drawing. But you probably don't want to exactly reproduce that anyway. So whatever changes you make that make it unique are yours. And I think, Nate mentioned this too, but it is a really good, like, so I was doing this class on basically using pen drawings to draw like these birds. And, some folks in our class were like, well, I didn't quite get this feather exactly right. And, there was sort of a reinforcement that like, there is no exactly right? Like it's your drawing. So you get to kind of make it however you want. So be sure to use that license and kind of be liberal with it whenever you are taking from something else.
And just to add to that, I think, if you were to just use the Google logo in there and it's obvious that it was just from the web and it doesn't like really align with the content around it, that's what gives things sort of a clip art feel. And I think that's the opportunity you have to draw it yourself and make it feel integrated to the piece. Cool. Well,
hey Nate, I had a question too. So I've been just kind of dabbling, and I've actually had asked my wife, because she's a little bit more artistic in this arena, to add to my newsletter post. But I'm curious. It always feels a little strange taking, saving an image and adding it to one of my posts, and it feels like I don't really know what to do with the background, and the like image itself feels like super boxy at times, especially when it's not like white on white, if that makes sense. So like you have the hands, and like the white background, will obviously serve you well, but like, how do you think about the background and it standing out as this like just kind of rectangular, image that goes along with, a bunch of just black text on white, on a white background? Like, is it weird to you? Like, how do you think about a background and how it stands out in a piece? I hope I'm making sense. This is kind of like, this is all very new territory for me.
I think about it all the time. So
okay.
The context of my newsletter, because I've used this image in a few different places, and my website has this cream off-colored background. And my newsletter is through Substack and it's white. And I don't want it to feel like it's framed within a box. Right. I realize you can't see my hands right now, but framed within a box. And so what I do is export this a few different ways. So for instance, here you can turn off this background layer and remove the background and export this as a PNG file. So you know, I'll just go in here and then, let's see, where are you? Whenever I need you, I can't find you.
You typically have to do it from like the gallery, sadly.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. If you go back there and then you can select and share. Select, pick that
I
one.
see. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then yeah, choose ping here. So what's great about that is that, you know, obviously you have transparency now, and you can apply it to any backdrop. And for my website, you know, you increase. So there's a couple of things. Like I think about file size and increasing file size that way. But if I'm doing this for Substack and it's a white backdrop, I could either just use a white background here and make sure that I'm kind of treating the illustration so that I know the context that it's going into, and I'll take that into consideration from the first moment I open the screen. But if it's going to my website, what I'll normally do is grab the hex value of my website and then apply that as the background color here. So when I export it from here, I can export it as like a small JPEG. And so it looks and feels like it sits within my website naturally.
Perfect. Okay. So you are, okay. All right. So I think I'm sort of on the same page that you don't want it to have just this kind of like boxy standout quality necessarily.
I personally don't. Only because I think when you're reading an article, this maybe gets deeper into design in general, but like the idea that the borders around an image also are another visual element that stops someone from reading. And for me, I think if you can remove those boundaries around an image, so like the boundaries now of this image, if I remove this background, are the hands. And that's kind of a nice organic, natural feel that I want to communicate. And I think just having a square image would not, you know, present in the same way. So.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is great. Thanks.
One quick note. So just to try and address that, at one point I started exporting like drawings just as transparent with no background, and then it would just take the background on the page, and it looked great until one day I just coincidentally was looking at my site in dark mode. And the thing about dark mode is like the browser or the device will just do a bunch of stuff to like turn every white into black. And so then I had this like, you know, thing that was looking great on a white background suddenly on a black background, and it looked really odd. So, you know, if you do what Nate suggested, which is actually still have a background color enforced, and you ensure that that's there, then you won't have this problem. But if you just do what I did, which is just, you know, oh, just export the little thing only and it'll be great. Now that dark mode is a thing, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, interesting. Never thought about that. Yep.
Well, do you want to demo some of your work?
Sure. Let me switch cameras here. Oops. Okay. All right, so hopefully the glare gets a little better in a second when it adjusts. Apologies. Let me see if I can actually turn this brightness down a little bit. Nope, that's my kitty. Did you guys see that? Okay, so I'm gonna try and focus on this and see if you can get a better sense, but unfortunately the lighting, let me see if I can do some lighting from here. Okay, all right, I think when I actually look at something, you'll be able to see it a bit better. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you guys some stuff and then talk about it, and then you can ask questions. I'm mostly just gonna kind of give you a sense of like what's possible, what are the types of things that I do using Procreate, and what do I try and achieve. So I guess I would say like I've been drawing in Procreate for quite a while. There's like a lot of stuff here. I actually was so disorganized the first time I even organized it even slightly for this, but I do, you know, some kind of like visualization stuff for blog posts. Like this was one I did for a post on like Aristotle's 3 modes of persuasion. similar ideas, like very rough, you know, just sort of quick and dirty, but it's something and it makes it look unique and different. I've also used this, I don't know, at work, if you're ever interested in like, you might want to explain a complex concept at work, and then you could just do like a really quick diagram of like, here we're like a control and test group, and this took me like 10 minutes, and it was just really convincing, compared to if I tried to explain it, you know, with words. So just keep in mind that you can use this tool to do stuff like that. And I don't think Nate showed this, but just to give you a sense of like why that's easy to do, Procreate comes with tools to help make drawing like that particularly easy. So for example, if I draw a box like this and then I hold, so it just snaps it to make the line straight. Let me do that again without me in the way, but like you can also do it. Oh, I screwed that one up. But you can also do it with like circles. Weird. That's not snapping right now, but you get the idea. It will straighten these lines for you. And so when you're doing like quick diagrams, that's like a big benefit. And I would say, like, if all you use Procreate for was drawing boxes, and then you just go, you pick a color, like pick any color, and then you just drag it in and you fill it. And then you pick another color, drag that in and you fill it, right? So that is a really basic way that I would say you could get started with Procreate. It doesn't really matter which brush you're using, things like that. I would try and use it like as much as possible in your daily life or work. The reason I say that is, like, the more you use it, the more you practice it, the more you'll be able to do sort of interesting stuff. So, okay, a couple of things. One thing I'll show you is, okay, so here's a comic that I actually did for a blog post. So I don't know if you can see it, but basically there's a couple of things here. There's some characters, there's some background, and then there's text box. Let's see if I can move this a little closer so you can see this. And so one thing that was added recently, which I'll show right now, which is really cool, is text. So you can go here, you click this little, it's kind of in a weird location, but you click this little thing at the top here, this gear, and then you kind of go in and hit add, and you can say add text. And then you can add text, type in anything you want. And if you're using an iPad and you have the new iPad OS, you can actually write. I don't know if y'all have ever used that, but they have that new feature, handwriting, where you can literally just write words and then it turns them into text. So it becomes even faster. And a third thing, since Nate was talking about, I think you should really follow what Nate suggested, which is just look at photos and use them as reference. They did recently add this feature up here again. If you hit canvas and you hit reference, you can actually have this little box here. It's like a reference box. And so currently the box is showing me my own canvas, but I can actually click image and like import any image in there. And then I can just sit there and kind of draw that image directly. And so that's another way to draw from reference. So I would definitely suggest, like, kind of mostly playing around and trying to do as many different visualizations as possible. Any questions about that? If you also hold shift, it'll snap before you, yep, just tap it aside somewhere. Oh, I guess just general tricks, but like if I draw this, oh yeah, cancel. Let's say I draw something. I'm going to switch my brushes, and I'll show you some stuff about brushing in a second here. But let's say I just pick any brush. I do this. 2 fingers, tap to undo. 3 fingers, tap to redo. Okay. So those are like, you're just going to be doing that like constantly. And so it's really important to be like, oops, like that. Okay. And if you draw a bunch, like, let's say, let's clear all this. I'll delete this and delete this. Let's say, sorry, delete. Okay. Let's say that you draw something and you draw a person, you draw some legs, you draw some other legs, and then all of a sudden you kind of give them a horn, and you're just kind of curious what would it look like. You can actually hold the undo, so you can kind of see that. So you don't have to like keep tapping like a maniac. So those are like really small things, but super, super important when it comes to like making these drawings quickly. So like another thing I would say, if you're curious to like get into like a basic comic or like a basic, you know, let's just say a scene. So, you know, you might start with a stick man, but like Nate said, you can add a lot more just really quickly. Like if you turn a stick leg into a double stick leg and you add some shoes, you know, I would suggest focusing a lot on the eyes. You know, you can make them have sort of a weird shape. You can have a little nose. Another thing that you can do, so let me just go ahead and close this off. And then let's say I color his shirt blue. Okay, so this is cool. So actually, no, that's not a good color. I don't want that. I don't like it. Let's make it light. Let's make it light. Okay, so let's say I color that shirt like that. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to add some kind of depth to it, like shadow, right? Like Nate said, you just if you just add a tiny bit, even a little bit. Let's say instead of using that brush, I use like a painting sort of brush. Any of these doesn't really matter. But let's say I add. And what I really want to do is I want to like color here, like on the edge like that, so that it kind of looks like that side has the shadow, right? But you can see it kind of goes in and out. If you don't like that, what you can do is, let's say I clear this. So this layer here that is his shirt layer, and this is the one with the shadow. You can tap on it and some options appear. Tap on clipping mask. Okay, I'm not going to talk about masks too much. You guys probably hear about masks every day enough. Anyways, but like clipping mask is probably the one that's really useful, because if you turn this layer into a clipping mask for that layer, it means when I draw, it only draws on parts that previous layer has something on. So watch, I can draw here, nothing happens. If I draw here, something happens. You see what I'm saying? So now I can like sort of like lazily color here, and it adds that, but it doesn't add anything outside here. Okay, so this is what I mean. Like you can draw a stick man, but you could just go one step further and just draw some eyes, draw some feet, and then you've got a person, right? And then let's say, okay, well, you know, I want to just add like a basic comic box. Use the shape tools, so you can do that and have that line straighten. Actually, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use something nice. Yeah, any of these is fine. So I just do a line. I actually can't even draw properly. You can see because this camera setup, but let's do that. I do another one like this, but it's straightened. Now you can go like this. Even that was straight. See, now you got a little comic box there, right? And you don't have to be like good at that. You could just sort of like literally any sort of variant of the shape, and it'll do something with it. So then let's go back, and then you can go in and you can add text here, and you know you can there's all kinds of, you can set, this is kind of cool, you can set any font that you have, like any font. I actually have a font that is kind of I guess comic-y, you know, or at least I think so. So yeah, you just kind of, there you go. You can't really see it, sorry. But yeah, you get the idea. Question. Can you say more about how you think about layers? When to add new layer? Okay, great. Yeah, so yeah, let's talk about layers. So the purpose of a layer is separation. So for example, if I decided that I don't like this shadow that I just did, I can unhide that, and only that is hidden, right? So if I draw my rough outline and do the line work and do the coloring, and I do all of that in one layer, then I basically have no flexibility of what to change. So here's a fun thing you can do. So like, let's say I duplicate this layer. So to duplicate, it's kind of weird. So this is one thing that's kind of weird. There's some options if you tap on this, and there's others if you swipe. Don't ask me why, but that's the way it is. One of them is duplicate. So let's say I duplicate, and then I decide I want to see what he looks like with more of an orangey reddish shirt. Okay, so now I can sit here and be like, red, orange, blue. Oh, which one looks better? So that's one main benefit of layers is just separation. So you can undo, redo, and make sort of clear decisions about what looks good. But in general, it's good to also organize so that you have some sense. So for example, yeah, right. So let me just show you some more examples. So I showed you some of those comics. So you kind of have a sense, like how would one go about making something like this? Well, I mean, literally, I just drew a line like that and then held until it straightened. And then I drew a line like that and held until it straightened. And then I just kind of drew these. Now, if you look at it, I'm going to show you something. So I don't know if you can see this there clearly, but the lines are like really messy. They're like super scratchy, like almost like a child drew it, right? Okay. Now this one I spent like maybe an hour end to end on this. Now this one, I spent a lot of time on it. Okay, look at the colors. Line work is good. Everything's clean. I was very happy with this comic. Okay. No one cares about this comic. All right. Like I posted it. No one cares. No one cares about the post. Like zero traction. But I had spent like days and days like just tweaking this. All right. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do what I did with this. You want to do what I did with this, which is like, I just had an idea. I said, hey, you know what? There's something about expectations. I drew a rough sketch. I colored it in. I was like, whatever, it's ugly. I don't care. Notice even the paint style. So I use certain brushes that mimic watercolors so that I just kind of see how it goes outside the lines and everything. It's just kind of messy. You know, this comic got a lot of traction, and it's because the message was interesting, right? It's not really the drawing. So that's kind of another meta lesson here is like, you'll get better at drawing, but that doesn't mean the thing that you're drawing is particularly more compelling. It's really more up to like, what are you conveying? What message you're conveying? And now people say that's my style. You know, I guess it's a style. It's kind of like me drawing badly, but you know, whatever. It is what it is. So I would definitely say like, I will go back to one thing. So I don't know if you've noticed with these, but the shadow technique that Nate showed you, there's another technique, which is just to add marks with more marks with pen. See this here? It's just a little bit of black marks, right? With sort of a pen style, any pen brush. And that looks like shadow, right? You think now that this tail is kind of curling over. So you can do that as well. And actually, that's kind of a style here. See, like he's got something here on his little belly. See that? So that's another style. I mean, you can kind of pick whatever style you want. I like this because I just kind of do it and it's kind of rough. And then, hey, it looks like I did that as a style, but it really is pretty convenient. Cool. Any other questions there before I show something else? No. Okay, good. All right. So I will show you one thing which is kind of cool. So Procreate. So one thing that you can get really good with is if you start to understand how to use your pencil brushes and like shade the way you would shade, you can do you can start to do stuff like this. So like normally it's very difficult to do this with digital pencils, but now they have such nice pencil brushes like in Procreate that you can actually like shade sideways and sort of start to get these little shapes. So I'm showing you this mostly so that if you do use pencil a lot, don't be discouraged. You can still get a lot of the same look here. But there are some advantages to Procreate. So for example, I started to literally just use random brushes and draw random things. And then stuff like this appears. I don't know what it is, but it exists and it's a thing. And like, it would take me a long time to do this, with my pencil and some markers. So I would encourage you to just sort of try random brushes and just do random things and then see what happens. You can get a lot done. Yeah, let's see. So these are some Disney characters. I don't need to show this, but oh, another thing you can do with Procreate, which might be relevant to you folks who, if you've ever wanted to dabble in animation, I'm only going to show this for 1 second, but here's an animation. Let's see if you can actually see it. Okay. Okay. So for any of you who know who this is Boo. He's from Mario, and this is what happens when Mario turns and looks at him. Now, okay, you can see there's a little bit of movement, a little bit of flourish in the animation. You can see. Now, I will tell you, as someone who's really obsessed with animation, it takes a really long time. But in Procreate, what's awesome is you can just make a bunch of layers, and each layer gets treated as a frame in the animation. So here, I'll show you like from here. It's literally, it's just each one is a different drawing basically. And it takes the top level layer and then it turns that into an animation. So you don't have to have a whole fancy suite. You don't have to like use a fancy app. You just go in and you turn on Animation Assist, which is a feature here. And then this thing will show up here at the bottom, which lets you look at each frame and you can even, so for example, the last frame where he is kind of, you can't really see it unfortunately, but he's kind of like covering up his eyes. I made that one have a little delay of 5 seconds and the rest just kind of go, which is how it does this. Okay. So I didn't want to get too much into this, but I just thought you should know you can also do a little like animation to show some concept that's really hard to explain or show some, flow that normally you wouldn't show. Okay, I'm going to pause there. There's obviously more random stuff I can show, but questions overall or about these specific things?
Yeah, I had some more general questions here. So
Great.
first, thank you both. That like I've never been exposed to drawing in this sense, and I think this is gonna, I don't know, it sounds really fun. So I was wondering, like sometimes I guess I'm trying to see if there's like a low tech or way to get into this, because I don't want to just like go and like buy an iPad Pro and Procreate and like not use it. So is there a way to like, if you do like hand-drawn drawings, like how would you get them onto the computer? Is that something you might like suggest at all, or how would that work?
I would definitely recommend starting with pencil and paper if your goal is drawing and just learning about drawing, and you don't have like a very actionable, I have this thing in mind already and I just want to draw it, using an iPad. I spend a long time with pencil and paper, and it's also really kind of relaxing and fun. In terms of like getting it in digitally, it's never going to look like it does digitally. It's just no matter what you do. What you can do is, using your iPhone, honestly, it will get a lot done. It will go pretty far, but you can use a scanner if you want. But I've never found that you can get as clean backgrounds, like you can never get as solid colors. And so it's just never going to pop the same way. But I would look at paper as like a great way to just get into the sort of drawing habit. And another thing that you can do is, if your goal is specifically like stuff like these sort of like workflow illustrations and things like that, and not like kind of the weird stuff that I showed, there are other apps too, like excalidraw.com, which allows you to create these little frames and nice arrows and lines and boxes and stuff. So I would look into that.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, I had another question too. Is like, because I haven't looked into any of this at all. Do you guys have any like artists or resources you might recommend looking at?
Oh, it's a deep question. Yes, but I'm gonna let Nate go if he has any, because I've been talking for a while.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. I had my AirPods die. There's artists that, and
I might have to pull up my phone too. One really great recommendation would be to go to dribble.com with 3 B's, and you can just search for illustrators, and they have kind of illustrators all along the spectrum. And there's a lot of different styles, and a lot of people share their artwork. It's been on there for a long time. It's kind of like Twitter for designers in a sense. And so I would check that out as a way to be inspired. And to your point about hand drawing, typically what I would do is hand draw something and then just take a picture of it with my phone. And then I would just bring that in, either load it up on a drawing app on your phone and just kind of trace over it and just kind of get an idea of like how, I think it's just like the practicing of getting your lines kind of like, smooth and looking how the way you want them to look. And so I think just practice, that's really what it takes. And I'm not even good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would also note the new line of iPads actually does have Apple Pencil support, whereas previously you needed, not even the new, but like previously you needed an iPad Pro to use the Apple Pencil, for example. But now you can get like the most basic one and it does work with it. So you could find like a used one for a couple $100 from somewhere if you get to that point, which is great. It's just a little bit more accessible. I will, inspiration-wise, I always come back to The Little Prince. If you look, obviously it's the greatest story ever written by anyone, but the art itself is very like, if you ever checked it out, it's very much like light, colorful, watercolory, kind of messy. And so I guess his work really gave me permission to like, someone who made such a masterpiece is just like, hey, the baobab, and if you look at it, like the paint is totally all over the place. It's just so simplistic, but it says so much. And I actually kind of went through this journey where I was drawing hyper realistic stuff and trying to learn how to do that. And then I realized like, it doesn't matter if I don't know what I have to say, it doesn't matter. Right. So then I started coming back and getting messier and embracing sort of messy stuff. So anyone that helps you do that, there's a guy, his name is Peter DeSev, and he has this like sketchbook. It's hard for me to flip, but it's just sort of like weird, sort of sketches of things. And so I would recommend, if you like someone's art, check out their sketchbooks, like not their art, but their sketchbooks. Like you'll see like sort of their loose goose stuff. And, what book is this? It's literally Peter DeSev sketchbook. I got it recently. And so what I'll do is I'll just look at them and then I'll just draw them, whatever he drew. And then I'll kind of get a feel for what it's like to draw it. But yeah, I will say I have started to draw a lot more on pencil just because, and pen, just because I spend too much time on the screen. Thanks, Reza, for joining. Cool. Other questions for us? I guess we're almost out of time.
Well, that was pretty perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. 3:59. Nice. Well, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks, Nate. Big shout out to Nate for suggesting the idea and organizing this. So appreciate that I got to show some stuff, but thanks, Nate.
No, this is my first time doing this, so I'm excited to share. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us and we'd be happy to answer them.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Miko. I'm so glad to hear it. It's super simple, right? Yeah, I think they're really changing the game. Animation tools are usually very, very sophisticated, take a lot of machine power. And I've started to make tiny GIFs just using Procreate. So have fun with it. Send me what y'all made, or send us and ping us with questions like Nate said.
There's one last really cool feature that I just wanted to say. When you create art in Procreate, it records a time lapse of your drawing. So at any point you can go and export a video time lapse of your drawing, and it's super fun to share.
Yeah, there is a also, I guess you can link to there is a Procreate handbook. If you go to Procreate's website, it's got every single feature in Procreate. I will note I've never read it because it is so extensive. And I don't recommend that you sit and read it. I think that's too much. And I don't think you need to know all these features, even the ones that we showed. Just like think of something you want to do and then try and do it. And then when you can't figure out how, then look that up. Otherwise, it's too overwhelming, So that's cool.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.